Hello and welcome to the Grace Church podcast. Keep listening after today's message to find out more information about Grace Church.
Well, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, whatever it is for you. My friend Josh and I are sitting awkwardly close to talk to you about a hard conversation. We're going to actually have a hard conversation. We were just doing this series, Hard Conversations, and we're going to talk about one. I didn't want this sermon series to go on for a long time. And some of these conversations need to be hashed out, like more than I can do. And I don't always feel like some of them are appropriate for Sunday mornings.
Yeah.
And so I want to just have a conversation. And so today we're going to tackle a hard conversation about evangelicalism, or being or the America evangelicals, right? And it's been a big deal for a while. 2016. If you can guess the candidate, I will give you one nickel that 81% of white evangelicals said they voted for.
Did the candidate win the election?
Maybe.
Yes. I'll get back to you on that.
Yeah, okay. So, yeah, and that has caused some problems. So people, it's a hot button topic. And you, Josh, used to work for an arm of the NEA, National Evangelical Association. And so I thought, man, who better to talk about an evangelical than someone who worked for an association of them, a national association of them.
Yeah.
So tell us, do you mind telling us who you worked for, or not even who you worked for, just what you did,
Yeah.
and your association with National Evangelical Association?
Yeah. So as you know, and maybe some of you guys know also, I worked for about 8 years for World Relief, which is the humanitarian and development arm of the National Association of Evangelicals. I was the country director for Indonesia, and for a short time the country director for Cambodia, and oversaw work that focused on helping the poorest of the poor and those who had never heard the gospel to live better lives.
Okay, so in that, did you get a lot of training on what evangelical meant as you joined an organization that was a national association of them?
Not really. Evangelicalism, or the term evangelical, has been kind of amorphous since its beginnings.
Yeah, if evangelical is like a lot of things in church. It's been around a while.
Mm-hmm.
So evangelical is the cognate of a Greek word, and you're the Greek scholar as well, so you can tell them what it is.
Evangelion.
Euangelion. Euangelion. So, no, Evangelion, right? And it's that is the word evangelical is actually like a transliteration, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's like when you go to like a Spanish speaking country and they call a truck a truck.
Yeah.
when that's not the Spanish word for it.
Mm-hmm.
So what does Evangelion mean?
Literally, it's the good news, but it's the root word for evangelism, which in our tradition has always meant sharing the good news of Jesus Christ.
Yeah. So evangelical describes, it's this word, this Greek word that means good news, that is very much rooted in the New Testament. How is it used in the New Testament?
Well, it's used in the New Testament by Paul, or by most of the authors of the epistles, as they talk about going to new places and speaking with people who don't yet know or don't yet have a full understanding of what it is that Jesus' life and the kingdom of God mean for them.
Yeah, and that's one of the things. If you've ever heard me teach about like an evangelistic message, one of the things I try to bring out is it's good news, not good advice.
Yeah, that's right.
Like good news is hey, like good news would be, hey, this uncle you never knew left you a car.
Yeah.
That's not good advice. It's not like, hey, like good advice is, hey, be better, do better.
Yeah, that's right. And the gospel, or the good news, has always been sharing about the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus Christ and what that means for people.
And what does that mean for people?
It means that, well, that's where you kind of get into the heart of what an evangelical is, because obviously it means a lot of things to a lot of different people. But as an evangelical would tend to say that the primary meaning of that life, death, and resurrection of Jesus is that a person or a family, although they are imperfect and far from God by nature and by their own actions and choices, are offered through Jesus Christ the opportunity to rebuild a relationship with God and then have the kind of life that is eternal.
Yeah. Abundant, eternal, and rebuild through no work of their own.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. I mean, so like I don't know, I mean, that fits within Orthodox Christianity.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I don't know, I mean, are there anybody that under the umbrella of Christian, I mean, is there anyone under the umbrella of Christianity that would deny what you just said?
Oh, for sure.
Like, but is it the majority? Like, maybe, because I mean, how many billions of Christians are there?
Oh, lots of billions.
So, with that, like, I mean, would a big chunk of them disagree with what you just said?
Not in the developing world, but in the developed world, the rich Christians tend to be less evangelical, and poor Christians tend to be more evangelical.
Okay. So, but fits well within like the history of the church.
Yeah.
Orthodoxy, theologians, like theologians, maybe if they disagree with that, like they would say, no, that's a good definition of the
the
good news.
So you have, that kind of gets into these two kind of major distinctions that I think of when I think of evangelicalism, because it starts kind of in America, because America is the first place that's not Christendom in 1,000 years. For 1,000 years, you lived in a country where everyone from cradle to grave was a Christian.
Like by King's order.
By King's order. By that's just the way it was. The Pope said,
Yeah.
And so you have this thing called the Reformation.
I mean, he started all the way back with Constantine.
That's right, Constantinople in the 300s.
Yeah, so from the 300s till Columbus sailed the ocean blue.
Yeah, well, even past then, because when America starts, it's one of these this colonial enterprise, this idea that certain peoples had achieved enough prosperity where they could travel to other places and try to set up new places to live, led to new encounters with people who had never heard the good news, and people of different denominations or beliefs. And so America was kind of this weird place where bitter enemies like Catholics and Protestants or Lutherans and Wesleyans might be able to agree on some things because they were in the presence of people who had no knowledge of Jesus at all. And so I think that the first calling card of...
It kind of reminds me of like when you're young and you fight bitterly with your brothers and sisters.
Yeah.
But because really you're the only people that are around. But then anytime like you're with another group of kids and anybody says anything cross a little bit to your brothers or sisters, and you're like, okay, it's on. Like we're gonna, like we're united now. We were just fighting like cats and dogs in the house, but now we're out here, and now we're fighting this greater thing. Yeah,
and this idea that, all the creeds, across history, are ways of building walls that say what is orthodox and what is not. It's a way of distinguishing true belief from false belief. And you just don't see very many movements. You see things like the Reformation, where we say, as Protestant people, or Martin Luther says these things aren't right about what the Catholic Church believes. And in this situation, in particular in America, which was very unique, you have people that are trans-denominational. Like, we agree on these 4 pretty fundamental things.
Yeah.
And that gives us a bond that goes above our traditional, tribal, national, denominational boundaries.
Yeah. So there's a couple of guys that I really I like what they're kind of how they outline and define evangelicalism. George Marsden, he says, evangelicalism is a conceptual unity that designates a grouping of Christians who fit a certain definition, right? So that means they have a set of doctrines that are united, even like, and maybe they have more doctrines that they disagree with, but man, these core set that are core to both are very important. Second, it's unified as a movement. So it's evangelicalism isn't just some theoretical thing. It really is this movement that has some traditions and experiences, but super diverse. And then it's a person or a group or a whole unit of people who are consciously evangelical.
Yeah. Yeah, and so then you have to start talking about defining what do we mean by evangelical. Is it a self-identification, or is it a set of beliefs that you adhere to regardless of your kind of denominational or self-identification? And so that's a question I don't know that any of us can answer. Like, how should it be? Right now it feels like...
am I a member of a family,
Yeah.
or am I a person that just belongs to a family?
Yeah, that's right. And so right now it feels like it's more being defined from the outside as people who belong to certain denominations. But from the beginning, the word evangelical, if you look at the 1700s, people wouldn't have identified as evangelicals.
Because who do you evangelize?
Yeah.
Like, you send people away to go do that.
Yeah. Well, and not even just that. They would say, like, I'm a Quaker or a Wesleyan or whatever, but they would hold to these 4 fundamentals of faith, which is, again, pretty unique, because the idea that you have to make a personal conversion, like there's going to be some aspect of the gospel that you have to choose to receive, only makes sense when everybody is not exactly the same.
Yeah,
Right.
it's no big deal if everybody's making the same choice.
That's right.
Yeah, and I think what's really caused it's caused me some heartburn, is that somebody will say, like, oh, you're just an evangelical. And they'll mean something.
Yeah.
And I'll say, yes, I am. And mean something totally different. That's maybe not one of these 3 things. That what they're not saying is, hey, you're somebody that, even though you're very different than the other people that identify as evangelicals, you hold to a common theology and you hold to a common tradition and experience, and you're consciously evangelical.
Yeah.
I mean, it's been hijacked a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. And that's kind of tribalism at its core, is you know something about someone. But evangelicalism, from its beginnings, because it was focused on a few key doctrines, which is, if I remember my theology well,
I have them written down. I got the 4. I got the.
So it's a test.
Yeah, it's the quadrilateral.
Quadrilateral.
Quadrangle, maybe.
Quadrangle. Okay. As I remember, it's a focus on the Word of God as the revealed source of authority, a focus on conversion, personal decision for Christ, which doesn't seem weird to us now, but at the time, when you're born a Christian, that is pretty different. It also has a content of social action, like the idea that your life should be changed by the gospel that you believe. And then the other one is, the centrality of the cross. Is that right?
Yeah.
All right.
Crucicentrism.
Oh, crucicentrism.
Yeah, I mean that.
Sorry,
yeah,
I didn't.
I use that every day in my life. So crucicentrism, super important.
Which just
word.
means like Jesus is the only way, and it's
But that the cross is central.
real. Yeah.
The cross is central, and not the idea of the cross.
Yeah, but the actual cross.
The actual cross, right? And so, and I think one of the things that strikes me is that we're like, without studying this, it would be easy to just say like, man, evangelicalism is just divided. But I don't know that it was ever was it ever really united?
Well, no. I mean, if you think about, like, again, you go back to the founding of our country, evangelicals publicly sided with the British. They publicly sided with the revolution, and they publicly refrained from taking a side. And that's kind of been, America's pretty traditionally been a 2 or 3 party system. And evangelicals across the board have always, from the beginning, taken all the sides. So on the issue of slavery, you had abolitionists, you had abstainers, you had pro.
All under the umbrella.
Under the umbrella of evangelicalism. So the idea that this trans-denominational group of people that focus on a few common key themes had an aligned social ethic or an aligned political ethic is demonstrably untrue.
Yeah. I mean, like when you have something as big. So the 2 biggest things that I can think of, that the American Revolution and the Civil War.
Yeah.
I mean, two costly wars.
Mm-hmm.
And you had evangelicals on all 3 of those sides, on both of those things, like pro, against, and silent.
Yeah. And that's unfortunate in one of those instances, because it's clearly a misreading of Scripture in some sense to affirm the lesser humanity of one of God's creations. But what we see is that evangelicals, like every other religion and sect of religion, at times falls prey to the cultural mores of its setting. And so you tend to find more abolitionist evangelicals in the north of the United States than in the south. And you tended to find more revolutionaries among those who were disenfranchised by the British Empire than those who were hard pressed by it.
So there's this researcher named Kidd, and he talks about four types of evangelicals that you find in a lot of these big movements. You find the patriot evangelical, the reformist evangelical, the loyalist evangelical, and the sojourning evangelical. I mean, and then he says this kind of goes. This even kind of transcends denominational lines, where, I mean, denominations used to mean way more than they do today, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Like what did it mean to be part of that? Like to be like, what was denominational 200 years ago, 100 years ago, even 50 years ago?
Yeah, I mean, if you go back to Europe, back to the motherland, in some sense, for many of the people that were the first settlers, they were fleeing from the religious wars of Europe. German Lutherans fighting to kill Anabaptists because
they were Anabaptists.
They were Anabaptists and had political differences. So this marriage of church and state. And so when people came to the United States, at its best, there was this idea that somehow we as people who believed in Jesus had to create a separation. And it has taken, and I don't know that we've got there yet, a long time to decide how far can we go as a society imposing our moral and religious views upon the legal structures of the land.
Yeah. Well, and so, I mean, during the Revolutionary War, you have, patriot evangelicals that say this this is like terrible. What's happening? We want to fight for our freedom.
That's right. And you got other guys that were
The
ladies
loyalists.
Yeah, Romans 13, we have to submit to all authorities.
Yeah, I mean, and you had like again, in a different way, you have that during the time of the Civil War. You have patriots.
Yeah.
And then they even go on to call it like reformists.
Mm-hmm.
But reformists aren't like, so patriots kind of are more like burn it all down.
Yeah. Mm.
Burn it all down and we're starting over.
Yeah, Martin Luther's.
The Martin Luthers of, yes. Reformists are like, no, let's change it from within.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And the loyalists,
yeah, whatever has been shall be.
yeah, and then you have these sojourning evangelists that just kind of, they say, you know what, I just want to stay out of the fray.
Yeah.
And I think we see that today. I think we see that in 2020 over most any. I mean, you take churches that would call themselves evangelical and people that call themselves evangelical. I think so, but do you think we still have those same categories?
Yeah, I think those are like early adopters and late adopters. It's just kind of one of these universal ways of looking at life, though in different cultures it will play out differently. But I think the idea of reforming or patriotism or
I want to say patriot. I mean, the burn it all.
Yeah.
Like the
Radicals.
Radical, right?
Yeah, for sure. And I think, we've seen these kind of groups grow up in other countries and other religions.
Yeah.
And so I think they're definitely a part of the American expression of evangelicalism, as well as every other expression of religion.
Yeah.
Just with different reasons behind it, for sure.
Sure. I mean, some of that's just kind of how
humans are.
How God made people, right?
Yeah.
Some want to burn it, some want to burn the house down and start over. Other people's want to, they want to like really, just gut it.
Yeah.
And, or change some things slowly. And then you got some that's like, no, Grandma built this house.
That's right.
Grandma and Grandpa built this house. Keep it.
Mm-hmm.
And then other people are just like, hey, why do we need houses?
Yeah, you guys just do whatever you want. I'm going to be over here.
Yeah. I mean, so typically, where do you think, so personally, where, like in a lot of causes, where do you fall?
That's a great question. I tend to be, when you talk about more social causes or political causes, I tend to either be a sojourner or a radical. Like, I'm either burn it down or, I don't know. I kind of go, I have elements. I've lived in too many places for too long, so it's like I see reform and I see, I have a hard time with straight loyalism.
Yeah.
But the other three, I think, is kind of fair to say that I kind of walk among them depending on the issue.
Yeah, and that's where I would say too. I mean, I even preached a sermon a couple weeks about like why I publicly why I stay out of a lot of things. Because in a lot of ways, I'm a sojourner in that.
Yeah.
Like it's not that I don't care. It's that a lot of things don't affect me.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to work on them independently of public persona.
Yeah, for sure. And one of the troubles as someone who's lived more internationally than locally is I have a hard time getting as upset about these internal discussions that we have in our country, because I see that we have some definite things that we need to work on.
Hard.
Yeah, for sure. Super important. But when I talk about my personal priorities, like, it's got to be, Central and Sub-Saharan Africa. It's got to be human trafficking. It's got to be Southeast Asia.
Yeah.
Because those gaps are so much larger in almost every respect that it's hard. Yeah, it's just hard to pay attention to something. Sometimes.
No, for sure. I mean, and I get that. I mean, it's. I mean, I think, like, equity is a Christian.
Yeah.
A Christian, axiom that we need to be striving for.
For sure.
but where do you put the majority of your effort on some of this stuff?
And
Because
what's your perspective? Like how broad is your circle?
yeah, I mean Josh and I we looked it up the other day, and something like so average income in America was what
48,000 or something
yeah
like
40
that?
48 something like that, and we looked at what country was that? Was it Burundi?
Yeah, Burundi
Or
was
Zimbabwe?
Zimbabwe, Burundi, both below 600
A year.
a year. I mean, that's adding some, like saying I have a 3-figure income instead of a 5-figure. Like, it doesn't even matter how many of the 5 figures are. It's still way more than the 3.
Yeah. The difference between between 10,000 and 600.
Yeah.
Big deal.
That's right.
So like again, what you're saying then is you can even, like, maybe you even appear like a sojourner.
Yeah.
Whenever it's like, no, I'm focused on a bigger problem, not bigger to everybody.
Yeah.
But
for
like,
sure.
I'm focused on a global problem versus a local problem, and so it can appear like, oh man, you're this, you can't be bothered.
Yeah, and that's just part of the reality of living in 2020, is that all of the world's problems come into our inbox every day, as if as a limited, finite human, we could care equally about all of them or do equally for all of them. And it's just like you kind of, if you acknowledge your own finiteness and your own abilities, you have to say, like, I've got to focus.
I wish they just showed up in our inbox.
Yeah.
Like, it's our inbox, it's social media, it's on the television, it's on the radio, it's on the Pandora ads, right? If you're cheap like me and don't want to pay for, it's every, like, it shows up in all of this. Okay, so evangelicalism comes from these very diverse roots.
Yeah.
To the point where I would say many people who were under the umbrella of evangelical didn't like each other.
Oh, for sure. For sure. I mean, and we forget, because we've moved so far as a country, but German people and French people and Spanish people would have had different denominational affiliations, and they would have hated each other. Like, they didn't see each other as, oh, we're the same and other people are different. They would see each other as, I kind of hate you. You speak a goofy language, you believe heresy, and you're probably the servant of Satan. That's kind of where the ecumenical dialogue was at the founding of, at the end of the 18th century and the 19th century. It's like, you don't believe what I believe, you're a servant of Satan.
Yeah.
And so,
I mean, but you still have, so you have that, like, the dialogue changes.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think it gets better, but it's still, I mean, I have a buddy that grew up in West Texas with me, and he went to the military. He's a couple years older than me. So his grandpa was very much against the military.
Yeah.
So, which kind of weird for West Texas.
Yeah, for sure.
But he said, man, I'm so disappointed in you. The only thing that you could have done that would have been more disappointing to me is if you'd have become a Church of Christ preacher.
Ooh.
Right now that's not like that's not, French, German, Spanish, like, I hate you, I'm going to kill you, I'm going to start a war. But it's like, you could not disappoint me more than by becoming man, now if he would become a Baptist preacher, he would have lauded him. Yeah,
for sure. And I think as we kind of trace the history of evangelicalism a little bit, I think where that starts to change is with the advent of what was called higher criticism in Germany, and kind of begun by this guy named Schleiermacher. Yeah, but it was this kind of movement which split the church in America into what's called now mainline denominations and what are called the evangelical denominations.
So it was also known as liberal and fundamental.
That's right. At the time, it was like this idea that we could look at the Bible like any other book, which there's a lot of truth to that, but the ethos of the time in that sense is, and as real adults, we can figure out that it's all myth, and that Jesus was a good person who may or may not have actually ever lived, or if he did live, he was probably just a guy, itinerant preacher who said some nice things about loving people.
Yeah, nice prophet.
Yeah, and And for whatever reason, those people that believed, that followed that path, followed that liberal path.
Not liberal,
not
like
liberal politically,
yeah,
liberal
just,
theologically.
Yeah.
At the time, they
all
also,
these words take different forms. And,
yeah.
And so you gotta just well, we're gonna try to do our best we can to.
Yeah, best we can, because again, there's so many different angles to all of these things that there's a lot going on. But basically, these theological liberals who kind of gave up on the deity of Christ, and they started using words like myth, and they started using words like textual criticism and redaction and all these kind of things, because they were certain that miracles didn't happen, basically.
Like what's the most famous, in my mind, I'm thinking of the most famous thing of this is the Jesus Seminar.
Yeah, though that's way later, but
sure.
the same stream of thought, right? But just like, hey, it's
it's like you can't trust the New Testament.
Yeah, it's Lessing's ditch. I think his name is Lessing. Like, there is between us and what actually happened in Jerusalem this unbridgeable divide. But if we can pick at it kind of enough, if we do deep enough criticism, then maybe we can kind of figure out what the underpinnings are. And some really cool stuff came out of that.
Some really terrible stuff came out of it.
But some really terrible stuff. And it kind of leads to I don't want to say the death, but the minute, I can't remember the English word.
He's not a native speaker.
Yeah, it's in Indonesian. It's right there. It's like when you get pushed to the side. I forget what that's called. But you go to Europe now, and it's no longer the thriving. And this isn't the only reason, for sure. There's lots of reasons.
Sure. I mean, so like Jesus Seminar, they're the ones that, like, they have these little ping pong balls that are different colors, and they say, like, oh, this thing that Jesus said, he probably said.
Yeah.
Oh, this thing he probably didn't say. And they went through and picked and chose. And sometimes it's seemingly random. I mean, for guys that, when you go back and talk to seminary professors who were there and who talk to him about that stuff, sometimes it's like, well, it just doesn't feel like something he would say.
Yeah, no, and that's kind of, it all is based on your presuppositions. Like, if you suppose that a first century Jewish man couldn't have said these kind of things, well, then
it's gonna not be.
Yeah,
said.
that's not going to be real. Then that's later addition. And there have been some nice developments on that over the years that have kind of validated some of our perspectives, like finding a papyrus from 125 AD that has a copy of John on it, which, according to this kind of criticism, obviously couldn't have been written until very much later, because you got all this accretion of glory and majesty and salvation and godhood.
But then it's there.
But then it's there. But that's not the point. When we're talking about evangelicalism started to come into its own as an identity or a tribe, is kind of as it set itself in opposition to liberalism.
Okay, so let's go we're going to go back. We have Jesus. So we have crucicentrism.
Yes.
Right. So the cross is central, and then the writers of the New Testament, the followers of Jesus, go out and they evangelize.
That's
right.
right.
They wouldn't call themselves evangelical, but they would just say, no, our job is to go and spread the word. Right. So you have that.
Yeah.
I mean, and it's kind of funny to me, even within that, it's not like a singular, it's not a monolith. I mean, we see Paul and Barnabas split ways under, less than amiable terms.
Yeah.
I mean, so even at its very, very beginning, they are united in mission.
Yeah.
Not united together.
Yeah, Christians have never. I mean, if we expand it all the way out to say Christians, people who believe in Jesus, have never kind of walked in lockstep.
No.
It's one of the great differentiators. We have so few rituals. We don't have...
So few requirements.
So few requirements. We don't have a regular language that we have to speak that's more holy or whatever. We don't have styles of dress or ways of washing.
But just please wash. Wash your hands. It's 2020 coronavirus. Wash your hands.
And so that's unusual.
Yeah. So that, I mean, we see that, and that goes on, and the movement is moving through evangelism
Yeah.
until about 300 something, right? Is it 350, 325 or something like that? When the Battle of Constantine, of Constantine, he looks up, he says he sees the cross, and he wins the war, and he declares that Rome is now Christian, which all the Romans called atheism.
Yeah.
Because we didn't believe in all the other gods.
That's right. And it was a super nice thing in a lot of ways because Christians stopped getting killed so much.
Off and on for a while,
still off.
But they quit getting just killed so much.
Yeah, quit getting killed so much, and they were able to meet publicly for the first time,
which pretty incredible.
Pretty incredible. The idea that
not just legal, but like encouraged now.
Yeah, we could gather in some sort of a building, and other people would know that we were there and not
murder us.
That was big.
Big, right? So then through evangelism, though, I mean, as the Roman Empire is large, it's spread. Mm-hmm. And even through that, I mean, it's spread more. I mean, that's where, like St. Patrick, he's a Roman. He gets sold into slavery, right? Mm-hmm. Or captured into slavery, but then makes his way back and then goes back.
Yeah.
So evangelical, the evangelical mandate is being followed. None of those people would call themselves evangelical.
Oh, for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then you go into the Dark Ages, where Christianity, like the whole world, kind of hits a pause button for a while.
Yeah.
in a lot of ways, but Christianity's just kind of there.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's part of the cultural milieu.
Yeah, it is like to be European is to be a Christian, and you just. Yeah. It's just it's whatever it is, okay? And so, but it's like that in a number of places, not just, I mean, in Russia was like that, and a lot like the parts of Northern Africa, the Middle East, things like it's just you're just Christian, and then it gets attached to power. None of those people would call themselves evangelical.
Yeah.
Because everybody's a Christian, so who do you evangelize?
Yeah.
I mean, the closest things you would think of maybe is like in the Crusades. Mm-hmm. Those people would call themselves evangelical, and even though I disagree with them, their tactics they were still they were very different in their tactics. They didn't use a track or this was more of a sword. So then they come to America, and now you have kind of a restart.
Yeah.
Where the whole place isn't just everybody's a Christian.
Yeah.
Okay. So that goes until about when?
I think you have this kind of underlying evangelicalism, which was also called revivalism, the idea that there could be a great awakening.
Jonathan Edwards,
George Whitefield, and then the second Great Awakening, which was Finney and some of those other guys, is happening at the same time. This kind of higher criticism is being formed in Germany in particular. And that's coming to the end of the 19th century, when there's also a lot of other random pseudo-Christian...
Christian-esque,
Christian Science...
Mormonism,
Jehovah's Witness, and
Seventh-day some Seventh-day Adventist stuff that is like way out there too.
Yeah, and so that's kind of, you start seeing these folks, what had been a nascent kind of underlying unifying force now started to be more, and it wasn't called evangelicalism. They would have called themselves fundamentalists. So people who in opposition to people who were giving up on the Bible as the inspired Word of God, who were giving up on the deity of Christ, they chose to hold tightly to the Word of God, to double down on the deity of Christ and the necessity of the cross
Crucicentrism. Good.
instead of universalism.
Yeah.
Which would be a more theologically liberal. And so we're not talking about which of these positions are right. We're just talking about how things develop.
So everybody's kind of an evangelical in America. I mean, or would at least say they're like for it. They're for the spread.
Yeah.
They're for evangelization. I mean, again, everybody's not everybody. Like, was kind of an ethos, right? Like, we are for this.
That's right.
And then you have the divide between fundamentalism and liberalism theologically.
Yeah, that's right.
And so really then you said they just try to hang on, like they double down.
They double down. And these aren't the only things that are changing. Like, we're going through the Industrial Revolution. We're moving from an agrarian to an urban society. We just had the liberation of slaves. And so we've got the end of segregation, at least for a time under Reformation. We have Charles Darwin and these kind of theories that seem to poke holes in Genesis. And the way that this played out is kind of what you might expect from humanity, is that once you kind of identify as a certain tribe, the majority of that tribe started doubling down on everything that was fundamental. So you see the Scopes trial, like doubling down on...
The Scopes monkey trial, right?
That's right. So
it was about evolution.
And not just evolution, like whoever can believe evolution, but teaching evolution in schools.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, it also meant kind of being for segregation, because that was a big change that people were opposed to. So these folks who were defenders of certain theological fundamentals that we would say is very praiseworthy, at the same time were indiscriminately, this is where the no dancing, no rock and roll music, like this kind of trend
my favorite,
goes from 1865, 1870 to, until today, because fundamentalists are still alive and well. Can't change the translation of the Bible. I mean, these are all ideas that the evangelical tradition held on to pretty tightly for as a majority, though again, not without diversity, until the 60s, I'd say.
Yeah. And so you have this guy named Marsden.
Mm-hmm.
He said you have kind of this so in fundamentalism, everybody who's a fundamentalist is evangelical.
Yeah.
I mean, more or less. Again, more or everybody's less. Not everybody, right?
That's right.
Everybody's just the majority. Like, and they would identify, yes, I am an evangelical. In the sense, like, in truly an evangelical. Bibliocentrism, crucicentrism, the activism, and conversion. Yeah. Like, personal conversion. Like, they would say they're for those, and they probably do something about that. But then you have this industrial, scientific, all this stuff. And it says, man, the evangelicals then again split.
Yeah.
They split into maintaining credibility in the modern age.
Yeah, and the kind of the great age of apologetics, which is only a small part of the story too, because it's also the great age of mission. Like, you have hundreds and thousands more missionaries that have ever been sent out at any time in the history of the world. Is kind of this evangelical uprising, in some sense, saying, like, listen, America isn't that important. Like, what's important is Sub-Saharan Africa.
So the sojourner won out.
Yeah, or
like, I mean, not won out, but I mean, like became so important, because it was all these people that said, you guys can fight over evolution, creation.
Yeah,
I'm going to go win people for Jesus. I'm going to go evangelize.
Yeah, so that was a large stream of, and then you've got this Pentecostal stream that comes up out of nowhere. That's just the idea that, God and His Holy Spirit is still working today. Like, these, evangelicalism was crossing denomination, it was crossing racial lines. At the same time, individual evangelicals, and large portions of them, were standing in opposition to
A lot of things.
and for a lot of things.
So evangelicalism was crossing all these things, but you had individuals and individual groups
yeah.
distancing themselves.
Yeah, for sure. Which is kind of like going back to the Civil War and the Revolutionary War and these kind of hot-button issues. There's been a plurality of voices.
And this is when you have, around this time, you have the National Association of Evangelicals.
Yeah.
Like they're formed. This is kind of when Billy Graham comes into.
Yeah.
In fact, the school that Josh and I went to, Dallas Theological Seminary, which I encourage all of you to attend if you feel so called to go to seminary. It was started in the 20s, around the same time, and what that was again a sojourners movement.
Yeah.
Right. So it was started by a bunch of Presbyterians that say we are not liberal theologically, we are conservative. So it started as like, we're gonna exit, we're gonna educate in a conservative, because all the seminaries for all the Presbyterian seminaries were liberal, right?
Yeah, that's right.
So they're all liberal, and they say you can't get a conservative education because, especially outside of the big cities, most Presbyterian churches weren't liberal theologically.
Yeah, and the resources it's not totally fair, but it's pretty fair to say that the wealthier folks tended to be much more liberal, and so the wealthier seminaries, the Princetons, the Harvard Divinity School, Yale, these tended to follow those German inspired trends towards higher criticism, and so it was these small rural churches couldn't find a pastor who believed that Jesus was a real person who had real things to say to their life that could give them hope today and for the future. And
so a lot of them banded together, and they said, we're going to form these seminaries. Dallas Theological was one of the earlier ones, if I believe. Mm-hmm. It's one of the earlier ones. But what happened is they got out of the Presbyterian system, and then they never went back. Dallas Seminary started the Bible Church movement.
Yeah.
And the Bible Church movement is, it's biblicism.
Yeah,
crucicentrism, not so much activism.
Yeah.
But conversionism for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Activism in the sense...
in the personal and private sense.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Not political activism per se.
Though again, it's such a... While there are large trends, like there's also... No one's dictating these things. These are just as people are kind of led,
Yeah.
The spirit of the times and whatnot.
So you have, and now we're getting into like the 30s, the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, the 70s.
So you've got where the National Association of Evangelicals comes from is you've got World War II, and you've got these evangelical Christians who have, for a while, kind of been theologically active and beginning to become politically active in some ways.
Like I remember this, I read Carl Henry. He says he's this leader. He said that neo-evangelism, talking about in the 40s, right? So this kind of this newer evangelism. He championed the need for evangelical social action. He said that it's the application of, not a revolt against the fundamentals of the Bible. Fundamentals of faith. So you apply it. Actually, do the right. You're doing the right thing in your private life. Do the right thing in public life.
Yeah, and so what you have is World War II is happening, and so a group of churches gets together and they say, "Hey, we need to help folks that are affected by the war." And some folks said, "Well, that's what the liberals do," because one of the big dividing lines between liberal and fundamentalist theology was, as the liberals left behind the deity of Jesus, they moved quite naturally into a works-based faith, like, hey... Humanitarianism. I need to do good things, and as I do good things, like Jesus told us to do good things, then I'll be a good person, type of a thing. And fundamentalists, because they were rejecting all forms of liberalism, they had kind of, for a long time,
They were anti-humanitarian.
Anti-humanitarian, except on the mission field where we built hospitals and schools and every other kind of thing. But that doesn't count because it was seen as a different kind of a thing.
Yeah, and this goes to show. I mean, I have these two great assumptions, right? That everybody makes, and they're always wrong. That people are always completely consistent.
Yeah.
I don't hold all my. I like to think that my faith system is super cohesive, and I know it's not, right? Even to the point where and that's why stereotypes exist. Like, oh, you're an athlete, you must also be a dummy.
Yeah.
Or oh, you're smart, so you must like sci-fi.
Yeah.
And a lot of times they go together.
Yeah.
And that's why certain stereotypes exist, but not always.
Yeah.
And so, but we don't do well we do much better with categories. I think our brain just recognizes them better.
Yeah, for sure.
But and so that nobody is completely consistent. And even in our I would say that at some point evangelicalism was pretty anti-humanitarian here in the States.
Oh, for sure.
But absolutely humanitarian, more humanitarian than the humanitarians were outside of the United States.
Yeah, and in some ways it was in a different category. And so
different category, you can have a different belief, yeah.
Yeah, so and still politically active about some things, but not, let's be honest, not helping people for the most part. It was more about
and so when the war shows up, they're like, hey, they dug their own hole, they can get out of it, is what a lot of evangelicals say.
And so, but this group that was led by Park City Church up in Maryland, I think, they banded together and they started to send food aid to widows while the war was still going on, to France, to England. And then after the war ended, they got even more involved with rebuilding Europe because it was just trashed, right? And we have this great kind of theological debt to the Latin American community because what they pointed out to the U.S. evangelical of the time was that we couldn't talk about a mission that only affected your spiritual life, which was where a lot of us had gone, even though we would say that social change or activism, the fact that it must affect my life was part of our key beliefs. Because we had been anti-humanitarian in our big picture, we'd become de facto, in a lot of instances, anti-humanitarian and so we weren't necessarily the most generous people, and we weren't necessarily the most compassionate people. And so they came up with this term that they called Mission Integral, which is, it's more like
that means integrated mission.
Yeah. It's not like integrated mission. It's like, so you've got like reduced fat milk, right? The opposite of reduced fat milk is not honey, it's whole milk. And so mission integral is mission with nothing taken out. And so they said hey, if you're going to talk about coming to Jesus, you can't ignore the fact that Jesus preached good news to the poor, the blind, and the oppressed. You can't, you can leave it open to interpretation how people want to deal with that, but you have to preach it, and you have to live it. And so
otherwise, you are you're a Pharisee. You're a hypocrite. Yeah.
And so you see in the 50s and the 60s, a lot of Christian organizations start to spring up to say, hey, we need to take this seriously. It's World Vision. It's World Relief, which is the humanitarian arm of the National Association of Evangelicals.
That helped rebuild Europe, right?
They helped rebuild Europe, and then moved on to Africa and Asia, and focusing on disaster at the first, but kind of over time looking hey, these systemic inequities between countries are not something that we as Christians can stand by and ignore.
Almost every denomination got in on this.
Yeah.
I mean, you have the Baptist men, right?
That's right.
I mean, the Baptist men is this. I mean, it's not just guy. I mean, it's not just men either. I mean, that's an old name.
Yeah.
But they do good work, right?
Yeah.
You have Pentecostal Pentecostal organizations, like Convoy of Hope is just one that rolled through Albuquerque.
Yeah.
They do good work.
Do good work.
I mean, you can find this in almost every evangelical
Catholic Relief Services.
Catholic Charities.
Yeah.
Is that the same thing?
No, different organizations, but both. I mean, the Catholic faith, who we had been so divided from, was again one of the kind of the leaders of this movement towards. Actually, it was a reformation the way that a reformation should be done in many ways, like not splitting off and saying everybody else is a heretic, but saying, hey, we missed it there for 100 or 200 or 300 years. We need to get back to saying, if we believe something, we have to.
We're going to form it again.
Yeah,
like a real reformation, not a split and a rebirth, like a birth.
Yeah,
illegitimate birth. Yeah, so you have but during this time, evangelicals are not in power. Typically, right? Politically?
Yeah, politically, historically, the evangelical church is the poorer church. Even till today, an African American or a Latino is more likely to be evangelical in their beliefs than an Anglo person, a white person. Not to say that there aren't many more white people that are evangelicals than other races, but that's due to population prevalence, not due to beliefs. And so the evangelicalism in its purer form is the religion of the people. And it wasn't until, let's say the 70s that a few really influential guys who have come to define evangelicalism for those who may or may not be evangelicals, which is Jerry Falwell and Billy Graham. In particular, Jerry Falwell, he saw that this mass of people with the same kind of beliefs were a potent political force if it could be harnessed. And so he formed what was called the moral majority.
Yeah, and I think you see this banding together. And again, it's never from the very beginning, evangelicalism isn't this monolith.
Yeah.
It's never even really united on anything except for these beliefs about evangelism.
Yeah, especially around what should we do socially, what should we do politically.
They're not even talking about that because they don't care what the other people are doing.
Yeah.
So you have this moral majority. Then it kind of takes over this Republican Party.
Yeah,
they start becoming anti-abortion, anti-pornography, anti a lot of things.
Yeah,
you got to have prayer and
gotta have prayer in schools.
Well, no. So not even that you got to have You can't limit prayer in school. You can't
take the 10 Commandments out of things.
Yeah.
They also, less fortunately, they kind of fought against segregation or for segregation. If I want to make my Christian school, then you can't tell me that I have to let Black or Latino people into my school.
Yeah.
These are just kind of political issues that became very strongly associated with the evangelical community because of this political movement called the moral majority.
And let's be honest. People stuck with it in a large part because it gave them power.
Yeah. I mean, it's human nature at its
finest or worst, whatever you want to.
At its worst.
Yeah. Like that is well, I don't really believe in segregation, but it's part of the package.
Yeah. Or I can use this. I don't really. Yeah. I mean, this is the lever that I can use to get what I want.
And if I don't buy it lock, stock, and barrel, I can't have it.
Yeah.
Right. And so then as the era of the moral majority goes on, evangelicalism becomes a political action group.
Yeah. And unfortunately, one that was in many ways known for its nationalism, its kind of policies on immigration and things that we would say Well, I mean, it doesn't. Things that got away from its roots of, like, hey, each evangelical, as they read the scripture and as they are converted by the Holy Spirit, is going to be making decisions that are going to be different.
Yeah. Again, Paul and Barnabas.
Yeah.
I mean, all the way back to there, like different decisions about the same thing.
Yeah.
So we're already assuming that they're going to make different decisions as they read the scripture, as the Holy Spirit leads them. But political activism, political power in this way says you can't.
Yeah. And some would say that the evangelical community mortgaged its selfhood on the altar of political power. And that's a strong statement, and I'm not sure that it's totally true for, definitely not for the majority of evangelicals, but I think that's, when you talk about evangelicalism right now, like how are people seeing it? I don't think evangelicals are defining themselves in this moment, in the public's eyes. They're not saying, I'm an evangelical because I hold to these 4 beliefs. Right now, evangelicalism is being defined by some of the faces of evangelicalism, which would right now, I think, still be Jerry Falwell is probably still one.
Junior.
Junior.
The older one's passed.
Yeah. And then Franklin Graham, the son of Billy. They're both really well known and often well respected.
Or well disrespected.
Yeah. But everybody knows that they claim the mantle of evangelicalism.
And it's almost like when somebody says to me, "Oh, you're a jock."
Mm-hmm.
It's the same. It's like they're defining it, right?
Yeah.
Like they're defining jock on their because if I just say, "Well, sure I am," well, what does that mean? That means I like to play sports.
Yeah.
Or does it mean that I like to, rage at parties and drink a lot? Drink too. I think of like movies from the 80s, right? Like being the jock, you were crushing a can on your head and like running through a wall. It's like, is that the jock, or does it just mean like you like sports? Because if it's the second one, yeah, I like sports.
Yeah.
Does it mean I do that other stuff? Then no.
And the crazy thing about living in the divide between the sojourner tradition, the humanitarian tradition, is I didn't know any folks that would fall along certain political lines that would be the majority political line for evangelicals. And I didn't know very many white evangelicals. I mean, it doesn't fit the stereotype to say that the president of the National Association of Evangelicals is Walter Kim, a Korean American. And the chairman of the board is Dr. Jackson, an African American. And the vice chairman of the board is Joyce, I can't remember her last name, but a female. Like it goes against everything that people...
Are they really evangelical then?
I know. Maybe they're not. But...
just kidding. That's a joke.
And so even the president of the NAE has said, like, if the term evangelicalism has to go, it's sad because it has had so many positive things. Sure. But if it's had enough negative things and if this poison, then maybe we just need to let it go. Because in the end, we have to be able to define who we are as a community. Yeah. It can't be like we don't let non-artists define what it means to be an artist, or non-football players. I mean, we do those things, but that's not how it's supposed to be.
Sure, and that's not how the the community of people define it for themselves either.
Yeah, that's right.
And so when I say I'm evangelical, it means I'm for those 4 things. Mm-hmm. Still am. I mean, I don't think that's ever changed for me. Right? It doesn't mean I vote a certain way.
Yeah.
Like, because if I really believe in true evangelicalism, means that I read the scripture. And the Holy Spirit empowers me to make decisions based on my conscience and based on the teachings of Christ.
Yeah. And surprisingly, or unsurprisingly, we can have genuine agreement on the idea that Christians, followers of Jesus, need to care for the oppressed, the widow, the orphan. and have a total disagreement on whether we believe that a public institution is the best way to do that, or whether a private institution is the best way to do that, or personal
Like individuals?
Individuals is the best way to do that. Or, I mean, it's not like those things are close together. Those are political discussions about which genuinely evangelical, God-fearing, Jesus-loving, compassionate people can take totally opposite views. And having lived in very different countries, I can see the logic in all of the positions.
Yeah.
Because I've
Most of them.
Yeah, I mean, I've lived in places where the government has done a lot of good for people. I've lived in places where the government has done a lot of bad, and bad that we can only
Like
imagine.
not bad, like, I mean.
Bad like murdering 1 million people.
1 million.
Yeah.
Like all but 3,000 of the Christians, right?
Yeah, it's just, I mean, there are things that are hard to hear and hard to believe, and it's these things that Christians have to be as innocent as doves, and I take that to mean that our motivations have to be pure. I can't say like I don't support, or I support this government because I like the power that it gives me, but I'm going to say it's because I want to serve the poor. And I can't say I don't support the government or government intervention because I really just don't care. And that's don't tread on me and all these kind of things. Innocent as doves means my motivation is to follow Jesus.
Yeah.
But wise as serpents means I have to do the best that I can as someone whom God has given a
Discernment,
mind,
right?
discernment, wisdom, to say that in this time, because 2020 is not 1820 and it's not 1920, and the technology today and the political system today and the population today and the issues today are not what they were 100 years ago or 50 years ago, and that means the choices and how I interact in this complex and ever-changing system have to be different than they would have been 20 years ago or 100 years ago.
I also think, too, people align with evangelicalism as a mantle have no idea what it means. Many of them.
Oh, for sure. I think
Like we just spent, an hour talking about that, and they're like, whatever. My granddaddy was a was a Methodist, an evangelical Methodist.
Yeah.
So I'm evangelical.
And it's interesting, if you look at the social science, like whichever way you want to define evangelical, it comes out to 25 to a quarter to a third of the population. But one of the definitions is by denomination, where you've got a lot of that. And the other definition is by belief system. Those are talking about different people.
Yeah.
Because just because you grew up in a denomination that's traditionally evangelical doesn't mean that you yourself believe
to hold those
evangelical
four things.
Yeah. And just because you don't identify with evangelicalism, maybe because of your history, culture, hurt by church, race, whatever it is,
doesn't mean you're not evangelical.
Doesn't mean that if we use that second sense of what do you believe, that you couldn't be defined as an evangelical.
Yeah.
So
that's
what do you mean?
like when I hear 81% of white evangelicals voted for Trump, I just look and go, maybe.
Yeah, because I mean, if you look at the South, in particular the Bible Belt, where you're pretty close to Christendom still.
Yeah.
Like everybody is cradle to grave.
Like when I lived in
is.
Dallas, or lived north of Dallas, I mean, I was a youth pastor, right? So you got to go do the youth pastor thing where you take pizzas to school.
Yeah, that's right.
And I'd been the youth pastor there for almost a year at this church. I was like, hey man, I'm talking to kids. And I was like, hey, I'm a new youth pastor in town. I'm just visiting. Because they're asking me why you're bringing pizza, right? Because they're middle school kids. And he goes, oh, all right, I go to church. I was like, oh, great. What church do you go to? And he said the name of my church. And I was like, great. I've been there a year, right? And I didn't tell him that. It's like, oh, do you go all the time? Oh, I go every week. I go Sundays and Wednesdays.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, man, that's awesome. Who's your youth pastor? And he named the guy that was there like 4 years before me.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he didn't know.
Yeah.
He went to church, and really what it had, like, he went to church with his grandma when he was little,
Yeah.
and now he was in, like, he wasn't even he wasn't an old guy. He was like in ninth grade or eighth grade or something.
Yeah.
And he was like telling me, no, I go to church. I'm a good Christian church kid. I have a church I go to. I know some people there.
Yeah.
That's cultural Christianity. Like, is that guy really an evangelical? Promise you he was not.
Yeah, for sure. And without doubting, like without downplaying evangelical support, which has been vocal for the current administration.
But all the way back to Reagan.
Yeah, back to Reagan, this Republican.
I mean, evangelicals got Jimmy Carter elected.
Yeah.
Turned out, he goes down, and I was barely alive when he was in president, but people say he's a terrible president.
Yeah, but the idea that everyone that a survey says is evangelical, it's like everyone that a survey says is Christian. Do you go to church regularly? Sure, every Easter, every
twice a year, whether I need it or not.
That's right. And a lot of my friends go there, and my grandma still goes there. While this has changed, at least in the South, the church has been traditionally the center of social life. And so believe or not, I mean, you're still a part of that affiliation. You would still identify with that group. Because if you don't identify with it, that means you're excluding your own family and friends.
You're not. You're something else. So where do we go from here, Josh? What do you say to somebody that's like, man, to be an evangelical in 2020 is just awful because I get lumped in a group with racist, sexist, this president, this political party, this ideal. What do you say? Like, where do we go? I mean, just give me the Josh take on this.
Yeah, Josh take, which worth what you paying for it.
Exactly what you're worth paying for it right now.
I think of two things, which is first, realize that your affiliations have a power over you and the way you think. And so as you identify as evangelical and you choose to watch and read things that are also evangelical, you will be tempted to exclude other viewpoints. And I would say that has to be primary for all of us. We have to be, as much as we can, biblically centered and unwilling to compromise. This is, again, my take. The book of Revelations is not only a book about what will happen in the end of days. A book of Revelations is John's utter refusal to bow the knee or to sanctify what's being done by the power of the day.
That's contrary.
That's contrary
to the
word.
teaching of Christ.
That's right. So he's like, I've got to call this out, and I'm going to call it out in strong language, and I'm going to call it out in hidden language so that I don't get killed that fast.
Just a slower death.
Slower death. But that's something that I do feel like there are many among those who would classify themselves as evangelical who have fallen prey to a certain kind of a groupthink and feeling the need to defend certain things which run contrary to the Scripture because that's a tribal affiliation, and that's part of this sojourner mentality that we have to continually put on as people who
are sojourners in this world.
As people who believe in Jesus. Like, we just have to say, like, hey, I'm going to be a stranger and a foreigner. And that means no one is the Antichrist or the devil incarnate, and no one is God incarnate. I have to hold every person, including myself, as fallible and capable of making a mistake. And then the second thing, which I've had the most practice with, because as much as evangelicals have a reputation in the United States, Americans have a reputation internationally, and you just get categorized. You get lumped into this thing, and I just say,
you got no choice either.
You got no choice. You can't protest, though I did pretend to be Dutch for a little while.
It
Because
helped.
not when I was in Indonesia, because they were a Dutch colony. But
Very disdain for them.
yeah. But I think, one, you just have to let go of this idea that you need to defend your identity. Like, that doesn't help anything. Or it doesn't help anything, in my opinion. This word, evangelical, if it is to be redeemed from how it is perceived in public conversation today, is not going to be redeemed by our defense of it, by our showing people that we weren't really wrong in the past. We were actually right, and you guys
The
were
most
wrong.
right.
We were the most right. But if you can, and I can, continue to act in humility, in love, continue to be biblically centered, continue to be people who are centered on the cross, continue to be people who are thoughtful, who are being converted in the way that we act by the Bible. Those words, much more than any political words, much more than any apologetic words in the sense of defense, will be the things that begin to change perceptions.
And I would just say, too, one of the things I think we can do is not lump all of our thoughts in with whatever we are part of.
Yeah,
right.
That's exactly right.
Like, I mean, we're in 2020, right? So COVID is raging.
Yeah.
How people handle that, like, I don't think that needs to be an evangelical thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we can be different. We can have different thoughts about how it's being handled and how it's not being handled and what's being done and what's not being done. I don't think there is an evangelical response outside of what does the Bible say about how do you care? Like, should you care for people? Yes. Should you be humble? Yeah. I mean, there's those things, but let's don't tie 100 other things to evangelicalism and call it that. And if you don't fit in the box, then you're not really evangelical.
Yeah, and if we could have conversations that were characterized by humility and compassion.
Well, what? How dare you? Yeah. So, well, Josh, I'm going to go turn off the recording here in a second. So, any last words?
Thank you guys for listening. Appreciate it. I hope we can all remember that the world's a big place, and there's a lot of people that still need to hear the good news, and they need people to live the good news, and that's should be the center of our lives.
Thanks for listening to this week's podcast. We'd like to invite you to join us this weekend at 9 or 10:30 for one of our worship services. For more information about our weekend services, our location, or to partner financially with the ministry of Grace Church, visit us online at gracechurchadq.org.